let's talk about this third bridge.
Or as some people call it, the fourth bridge.
Or Chuck Bennett called it the second bridge in our meeting. He thinks the two existing bridges are basically one, because one goes,
One way and one
one
goes
way.
the other.
You're right that they're the same system. But either way, the one of the issues that we asked him was about the funding, the proposed funding of it, and shouldn't they prioritize the funding up along with the environmental impact study that they're currently working on? Shouldn't we have a public hearing on the funding? That was the question posed to Bennett. His answer, well, I won't tell you his answer. You can just tell us your answer.
Yeah.
So the same question posed: Should we be looking at the funding, which just really quickly has $1.50 on tolls for the Marion Street bridges and the new bridge, a 6 cents local gas tax, a $25 a year vehicle registration surcharge, a 37 cents per thousand of assessed value property tax increase, and so can you talk about should we prioritize the funding and have that discussion now?
I think that's a lot of nitpicking for funds to make it look like we might be able to afford to build a bridge, when I don't know why the city of Salem is even interested in building a bridge. The two bridges we have today, Marion and Center Street, were built and they are owned by the state of Oregon. So I don't know how Salem could put tolls on those bridges and take the money unless the state would agree to that. Why would the state want the money? So I think that whole funding plan is just a bunch of nitpicky little things to make it look like we could do it.
But scrambling madly to get $400 million locally.
Right. When I think the state, now, if the city is using federal and state grants to pay for all this planning of the third bridge, so that when the state decides to put some money into building bridges in Oregon, that we would be in place to have a third bridge, that's something else, if the state's gonna pay for it. But, essentially, I think we ought to be working, that plan is probably 10 or 20 years down the road that we're preparing for now, and we're using up staff time that could be working on other things in the community that need to get done. Yeah, they're more productive today. So I don't see a clear funding path. I don't see why the city is building a bridge instead of the state. And I think we ought to plan for the next 10 years at least of how do we mitigate the problems of the bridge, because traffic is getting really bad over that bridge, but it's not the bridge. Everybody seems to want to blame it on the bridge. It's the traffic lights on Wallace Marine that stop all that traffic that backs up for blocks downtown. And if we remediated, somehow had a constant flow lane during certain hours of the day.
I've talked to transportation experts, and I've worked with them on other consulting jobs that say you could virtually solve that problem. Now, I don't make a judgment whether you could solve it or dramatically help it, just with traffic light and adjustments downtown and Wall Street.
Right. I agree with that.
And boy, if that's even technologically possible, we sure as hell ought to be
looking at that instead of $400 million. Yeah, I agree.
So as mayor, where would you try to steer the
process?
Yeah, process.
Well, I guess I would talk to the state legislators and just ask how far down the road would it ever be possible that the state would actually build a third bridge in Salem. If they say never, that's an answer that we need to respect and then plan from there. If they say it's 10 years, then maybe we need to really look at it, finishing up the process to be ready. I think it's more important that we remediate the problems today, though, because the state changes their mind all the time. I don't think we can rely on the state anytime soon funding a bridge.
They say you can't.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been on the third bridge task force, and there's several issues here. Number one, nobody's sure that the bridge as proposed now, the Salem alternative even, which is supposedly a cost-effective, clamp down from the original, would solve the problems, even the problems as identified in the task force. Secondly, one of the options that I like is a simple span of the Willamette River up near Dundee or something like that, because a lot of the bridge, the 800-pound gorilla in the room is getting through traffic, through Salem, truck traffic from Portland to the coast, you know, or up Highway 22 to the coast, this kind of stuff. And that's been the tail that wagged the dog in terms of the proposals that have been evolved. And that but what Salem has is a rush hour problem.
Right,
And that's all.
right.
And, you know, my proposed solution is a streetcar system.
You know, somebody brought that up, why don't we do a max line to West Salem and eventually to Dallas and Independence and get all those cars off the road? And I
Right.
thought, you know, that's forward thinking, that's
Yeah.
what I wanna hear from citizens. I wanna hear their solutions because they live here, they pay the taxes here, and they know what the solutions are. Somebody out there has a solution to every problem we have.
If you had a streetcar system that does a loop in West Salem and a loop downtown, the data showed you get 39% of the commuting traffic. Well, that's enough to alleviate the rush hour problem.
Right,
And the system, such a system could be built for 120 to 150 million, and probably 80% of it financed federally. The feds came into the task force and told us in no uncertain terms at the start, please understand you will never get more than 20% of the funding from the feds, maybe none. Good luck. And that's run the thinking from the start.
Let me ask you, because you just brought up a big idea. What about a max line in Salem? It's a big idea. I've heard you bring up a couple of big ideas. One was the use of the correction.
oh, the facilities for homeless.
Yeah, right. Next to Fairview, I forget the name of the
Hillcrest.
Hillcrest. Thank you. And I've heard you mention a couple of these. Is that different than the way that the city? I mean, the third bridge is a pretty big idea, right? I mean, are they just looking at the wrong big ideas, or how are your big ideas right? And what would you say to somebody who says that big ideas like that are not as realistic, you know, and therefore?
Yeah, I think we need to have big ideas as a community, but they should be big ideas that are within our means and benefit the citizens that live here. I don't think the third bridge is gonna be built to benefit the citizens. That's just gonna get those Portland people to come down I-5 and get to the coast faster. It's really not going to solve our problems here. So yeah, we do need big ideas,
But we're asked to fund it.
yeah.
Well, I heard you refer to big ideas in regards to the streetscape or development of downtown rather than small incremental ones. You mentioned, I think at the last debate with the City Club, you mentioned something about it, having it be on a national magazine.
Oh yeah, well, if they did the streetscape project that the citizens envisioned, we would be on the cover of Sunset Magazine and probably others as the best downtown ever. McMinnville, Oregon got the second best downtown in the nation for a mid to small size downtown. We can be better than that. McMinnville doesn't have anything that's magic, except they have captured the assets that they have around the McMinnville area. Yamhill County is a wine growing area, so is the West Salem Hills. We just ignore it.
Well, what would an article do?
Oh, I think it would spotlight Salem. I think it would make it easier for Travel Salem to buy ads that really appeal to people. What we have in Salem is, what we want are historic tourism, so people want coming to look at historic houses and historic buildings. Culinary tourists that are, good food. They want to go to a place with good food. And the third is botanical tourists. Those three kinds of tourists have the most amount of money and spend the most amount of money when they're traveling. So why don't we want those people in our community? I asked a winery in West Salem that was part of a group of 8 wineries in the West Salem Hills, why don't you have a tasting room downtown? And her answer was, well, we've talked about it, but there's nothing there. So I went, whew, boy, that was an arrow straight to my heart. Yeah. But it made me realize how people outside the downtown view it. And what she's saying is there are no tourists downtown, because a tasting room requires people who are coming and going all the time.
You know, we've made the kind of intellectually barren assumption for years that state government is our attraction.
Right. And we need those folks, but we also need tourism.